everyone. Welcome to the first ever CrimeCon at Home, presented by Oxygen. I'm Stephanie Gomolka, a correspondent with Oxygen.com, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. Right now, most of us should be at home recovering from a great weekend at CrimeCon in Orlando, but instead, we're all mostly home, dreaming of the fall when we can hopefully get together safely and do this for real. While nothing can replace the excitement of meet and greets, canine unit demonstrations, or seeing your favorite podcasters in person, over the next couple of hours, we're hoping to bring you some unique true crime content. We have a forensic demo from Karen Smith, a Mark the Killer panel from Oxygen featuring top behavioral experts, catch-ups with key players from the biggest Netflix docs over the last few years, and Ask Me Anything with the mayor of CrimeCon, Dateline's Josh Mankiewicz, and amazing podcast panels, including one from the last podcast on the left. You might want the kids out of the room for that one, but stay tuned. We have lots of surprises in store. Another reason for being here this afternoon is to take a step back and honor the work that our first responders are doing during the pandemic. It's not lost on us that these heroes are on the front lines, risking their health and their lives to keep us safe. CrimeCon at Home is partnering with the First Responders Children's Foundation. According to their website, approximately 225 first responders are killed in the line of duty each year, leaving behind devastated families. But add to that the illness and hospitalizations that many could and will face, and this year will without a doubt be challenging. Amid the pandemic, the foundation has created a COVID-19 emergency response fund. They paid for hotel rooms for first responders so they can safely quarantine from their families, awarded grants to those facing financial hardships due to the outbreak, and they've distributed personal protective equipment. For years, they've also awarded college scholarships to children whose parents have been injured or lost their lives in the line of duty. We know many of you are facing hardships of your own, but if you're able to donate to this foundation, any amount can help their cause. To donate or learn more, you can visit crimecon.givesmart.com or text CrimeCon to 76278. As a heads up, standard text messaging rates apply. And don't worry if you missed any of that, plenty more reminders will be coming your way, but let's get to what you're all patiently waiting for and start the show. Our first guest is no stranger to CrimeCon or crimes in general. Karen Smith is a retired major case detective who has conducted more than 500 death investigations and worked on over 20,000 cases. If you've seen her at past CrimeCons, you know her presentations never disappoint. Hey Karen, it's so great to see you.
Hey, Stephanie, it's great to meet you too. This is unusual, but I think we'll roll with the punches.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that you're staying safe. I know you have something really cool planned for us today. What's the setup you have going on?
Well, I am being really safe. I've got one glove on. I don't really know what that means, but I'm going to put the other one on now so I can do some demos for you guys. It's going to be interesting because I get a lot of questions when I do my demos and I do my lectures about forensics in general, but there are a couple of questions that I get all the time. The first one is when I go into a crime scene, I deal with blood a lot on violent crimes. And how can I tell if something is blood and if something isn't blood? And there's a specific way we do that. And it's actually really cool. And it's a little test kit called phenolphthalein. This is it. It's in this little box. So what I'm going to do today is I have set up a little experiment to show you guys how to tell if something on a surface is blood or not. Now, because it's a presumptive test, that means we don't know positively that it's blood. But if we get a positive reaction with phenolphthalein, we can send it to the lab to have DNA and species tests run and go from there. So it's pretty easy. I have set up a little kitchen towel here, and I'll tell you how I got my blood on this towel. But I did. That is blood. That little stain there is blood. This down here is not. But when you get to a crime scene and you see a small area like this, if somebody's tried to clean something up or they've dabbed away blood somewhere, it just looks like a reddish brown stain. It doesn't tell me if it's turpentine or if it's food or, Kool-Aid or Jell-O. I have to test it. And that's what this test is for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these reagents, and I'll show you what they are. First thing that I'm going to do is just use a swab. You get these in bulks by the thousand. It's really simple. And you pull one out. It's a clean swab. And the first thing that I do is I take distilled water, and I'll hold this up to the cameras, just distilled water. And the reason we use distilled water instead of tap water is because tap water holds metals and other minerals that can give a false positive. So we want to stay away from that. You have to use distilled water. And what I'm going to do is just take it and put a couple of drops on the tip of my Q-tip. And I'm going to swab this little stain. Let me turn it to the camera. This little stain right here, and see what happens. All I do is just rub the cotton swab on it like this. This is very awkward, trying to do it to camera. I'm not used to doing that. I'm used to doing this in a crime scene. So I've got some on the Q-tip. You can see it there, okay? We're going to find out if that's blood or not. So we're going to put the distilled water away. The next thing I'm going to do is, because this is a very, very small sample, phenolphthalein reacts with the heme in blood, which is the red blood cells. And if you have a really small stain like this that you have to test, sometimes it's best to break open the cell wall to allow that heme out so that you get a stronger reaction. And the way that I do that is with alcohol. Regular old everyday alcohol. These are very complicated things. So I'm going to take a drop of alcohol and put it on my swab. That's it. Now those cells that are on there, if this is blood, they're breaking apart and allowing that heme to come out into the Q-tip. The next thing that I'm going to use, this is phenolphthalein reagent. Phenolphthalein, you see it's clear here in the bottle. Phenolphthalein is normally pink. And if you look really closely around the edges, maybe you can see a little bit of pink around there. And that's because oxygen has hit it. And that's what it's reacting to. Your red blood cells are full of oxygen. And this chemical, phenolphthalein, has been boiled down to the point that the pink color has literally been boiled out of it. So when I put an oxidizing agent on it, which is hydrogen peroxide, I put an oxidizing agent onto it, what's going to happen is, ta-da, I am going to get that pretty pink color back. And that's how you can tell that you're dealing with blood at a crime scene. That pretty pink color that phenolphthalein is originally, it wants its oxygen back. So if you think about what happens when you put peroxide on a cut, it bubbles. There you go. That's the reaction you're getting. And now it's a pretty pink color again. So that's how we kind of test substances at a crime scene to find out if we're dealing with presumptively blood or barbecue sauce, for example, or something else. So that's just one demo. Pretty cool stuff. And it's really simple, and we do it a lot. You can use phenolphthalein. There's a lot of fancy names. Tetramethylbenzidine, leucomalachite green. There are all these really long names, but essentially they do the exact same thing. They work with the human blood. They react with different colors. It's a very simple test. So that's the first demo that I was going to do for you guys today. So we will get rid of that. And the way that I got my blood on this, I didn't accidentally cut myself. What I did is I took, I have the little diabetic, I'm not a diabetic, but I keep a little test kit with the little needles. And I literally just poke myself in the arm a few times. I've done it years for my demos. And that is a painless and easy way for me to use my own blood so that I know what I'm dealing with, which is really important, especially these days. So that's the first demo. The second one I want to do is a little more fun and a little more visual. I know this is going to be a family event, CrimeCon at home, and I wanted to do something not just for the adults and the people who are really seriously into the forensic aspect, which is the blood test, but I wanted to do something fun and visual. So what I'm going to do is show you how to do some fingerprints with fluorescent powder and some UV light. The kids love this. Adults love it too, but the kids mostly love it. So here's how I'm going to work it. This, crazy as it sounds, is a fingerprint brush. Normally when you see a fingerprint brush, it looks like fiberglass or horsehair or something like that. This is a magnetic fingerprint brush, and you can see the fluorescent powder on it. This is fluorescent powder. This isn't any fluorescent powder, it's magnetic, meaning it's got little pieces of magnet inside, some iron ore mixed with the fluorescent powder. And when you do that, this is really cool. And this is the part where you get the oohs and ahs. I always get oohs and ahs in class, and it just makes me smile. So what I'm going to do is take this magnetic brush, and I'm going to put it in here. And what it does is it makes a brush. It literally makes a fingerprint brush. And I don't want to make a humongous mess on my desk, which I will. But that's what it does. So there's the powder on the end of the magnet, if you can see that. So what I'm going to do is take a bottle. It's almost empty. I don't know why. But we'll use this one, okay? And what I'm going to do is, again, it's a little awkward. But when I deal with something at a crime scene, and this has fingerprints on it. I loaded this with fingerprints. But if I'm dealing with something like this at a crime scene, I don't know where the prints might be or might not be. So I want to hold it where other people might not. So I want to be really careful of that. And all I'm going to do is really gently just brush the tips of the magnetic powder across the bottle and find out if there are prints on it. And magically, there they are. They will appear. There you go. And there's the fingerprints. You can see them. But it's not just that. When we're at a crime scene and you're dealing with fluorescent powder, yes, you can see them here. Magnetic powder is pretty heavy, and it leaves a pretty heavy deposition. Normally what I would do is take a clean brush and I would sort of dust off the excess. But we don't have time for that right now. So what I'm going to do is do the really cool part. And I'm going to use this, which is a pocket light. But it's a blue light. And it's UV, and it's got 3 different settings on it. Really simple. So when I shine this on those fingerprints, I don't know if you can see it. It may be too bright. Let me try a different setting. How about that? I'm going to try it and see if you guys can see. It may be too bright. There you go. There you go. How's that? So now you can really see those prints really, really well. And sometimes what we'll do is we'll also wear orange goggles or green goggles or red goggles. And what those do is block out part of the light so that all we see is the print. And a lot of people ask me, well, how do you know what color powder to use? When you use fingerprint powders, what you're doing is creating contrast on the object you're working with. So I chose a green bottle on purpose, not just because it's gin, but I chose a green bottle because red shows up really well on green. If I had a red bottle, I would use green powder. Sometimes if you use black powder, black fingerprint powder on a darker surface like green or dark blue, it doesn't show up really well. So you can use silver or white or any other kind of powders. I don't like white powder because it can get really chunky and it's difficult to use. So with the fluorescent powders, it's really fine and it sits really well on the surface of those latent prints because that's what they are. Believe it or not, fingerprints are 3-dimensional. The surface has 3 dimensions to it. When you leave that print on something, the residues actually stick up and you have ridges and then you have furrows. And this sticks to the ridges. And that's what gives you the pattern so that we can photograph them after we're done with fluorescent powder. If we use black powder or silver powder, we can use tape and we can lift them and then put them onto a contrasting background. So when you do fingerprints, remember everything that you do is contrast. You want to bring that print out so that you can visualize it, photograph it, retrieve it, and then send it off to the latent print analyst so that they can see if there's enough detail to make an identification. So there's that. Those are my demos today. And I really hope that you enjoyed them. They're a lot of fun to do, and these are really simple. Everything that I've used today is available online. You can buy it. You can do the experiments yourself at home. Just be really careful and wear gloves. And if you're going to be using chemicals or anything like that, obviously use a mask. I would normally have eye protection on, but because we're online, it just wouldn't look good. So I did not do that. But yeah, that's basically it. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I feel like I'm going to be going online and buy one of those kits to test it out at home myself.
Yeah. Cool thing. One more thing I wanted to show everybody. This is an actual alternate light source. I mean, who doesn't have one of these at home?
What would you use that for?
This is for actual crime scenes. So the one flashlight that I used, this is great for little things like that fingerprint stuff that I did when you're in like a table in a controlled environment. If I want to light up a whole room with that UV light, I use this. It's really super powerful. And this is what I actually used at crime scenes. This is it. So I actually found one online and I bought it for my work here at the house. So This is about $2,500.
Wow.
So
wow.
Not a toy. Not that everybody can afford that, but you can afford one of these. You can get them online. So.
Yeah, that's cool. That's so cool. It's a cool introduction for, for people like me, myself included, that want to know what it's like to be in a forensics class or see what your day-to-day job was like.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my life. Most of the time was a lot of fingerprints, a lot of blood testing, collection, stuff like that. So now you know how we did it.
Yeah. We have some questions here, Karen, for you from the CrimeCon Insider group.
Okay.
Here's one from Jack Skellington. He asked, what are your best tips for a high school senior who's hoping to go into forensic psychology and behavioral analysis? It feels so overwhelming and I don't know where to start or what to look for.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a little bit out of my realm of expertise, behavioral analysis and forensic psychology. I don't really deal too much with that. I don't know who you're having on as guests. That may be better suited to somebody who is in that realm. But I would certainly say that, yes, it can be overwhelming. Anytime you're in high school and you're trying to make a path for yourself, it can be really difficult. If you're interested in psychology, behavioral analysis, behavioral psych, I loved behavioral psych when I was an undergrad. It was one of my favorite classes, learning how people function. That was part of my job too. I had to figure out how people functioned in order to work the crime scenes, because until you know why people choose the things that they choose or why they do what they do, it's difficult to read a crime scene. So I would say, look at your college programs that you're trying to get into, whatever university or college you're trying to get into. Look at the programs, talk with the counselor. If there's somebody that's going to be an expert here at CrimeCon that is a behavioral psych person, I would ask them that question, because I wish I could give you more advice, but I just can't, hon.
Yeah. We have one more question for you too from someone titled PSB. The nature of forensic science and investigative work requires close contact with people and objects. How will contagious epidemics like COVID-19 affect the work of the forensic investigator and the potential outcome of cases?
That's a great question. Luckily for forensic people like me, we're used to wearing Tyvek suits. We're used to wearing masks and eye protection and gloves and changing them often. So I don't think that it's going to affect the crime scene people one bit. We're used to it. We dealt with all kinds of disease when we were on crime scenes. We dealt with TB, HIV, we dealt with hepatitis, all kinds of stuff, just like the workers in a hospital would. So for us, it's really not going to be that much of a change. We may have to be a little bit more cautious, ask more questions. And that's where HIPAA kind of comes into it. So you have to be careful with that. But sometimes people will volunteer, hey, I have COVID. Well, then you know that you have to just use extra precaution where that's concerned. But I don't think that it's going to affect crime scenes one bit.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point. Another exciting thing, Karen, that you're working on that I know some CrimeCon fans might be aware of, but for those that aren't, can you tell us about your new upcoming podcast?
I can. It's very exciting. It's called Shattered Souls, and it will be released on May 9th in tandem with this. And thank you to CrimeCon for partnering with me. It's such a blessing for me to have them with me doing this. Anytime I can partner with people who are victims advocates, I am all on board. And this is a podcast about my stories, my forensic stories, my crime scenes, how I went through them. So it's educational. It also tells the victim stories, because I think that that gets lost in the ether sometimes. People like to focus on perpetrators and why they would do the things that they did. Well, I can't answer those questions, but what I can talk about are the victims and their stories, what I went through at the crime scenes, and then my story both there and afterwards, and how the fallout from all of that affected me and affected the other investigators. So that's what it's going to be about. 6 of my cases broken down into 12 episodes. I'm going to have some interviews with some of my coworkers interspersed in there. So it's just going to be a fun ride. And anybody that's into true crime, I think you'll really enjoy it.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds so interesting. I, for one, have been looking for some new podcasts in true crime to listen to. So I can't wait. And for anyone else, Shattered Souls, A Forensic Detective's Diary is presented by CrimeCon. It launches May 9th, as Karen mentioned. It's available on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. So be sure to check it out. And Karen, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day, and everybody stay well and stay safe. See you later.
In this nightmare, I'm back in the autopsy suite, and her teeth unstick from her lips, and she gurgles at me, "Please help me."
My name is Karen Smith. For 11 years, I was a forensic detective in Jacksonville, Florida. But right now, I'm just someone with stories to tell. Stories of victims you've likely never heard of, and the emotional toll that working around death and destruction has on the people tasked with finding the answers to what happened to them.
There are things about it that are deeply rooted, and sometimes you just can't get over it. And when we rolled her body over, and she put her finger in my chest and she said, "You find out who did this."
Follow along each week as I dig into my journals and relive the emotions, the pain, and the triumph of these hard-won victories for the victims and the shattered souls of their loved ones left behind.
Over the years, we've been fortunate enough to see an incredible amount of high-quality true crime shows, books, and podcasts being developed. Oxygen, where I work, has consistently invested in new, high-quality true crime programming. Still, documentaries, regardless of the platform, have provided in-depth, necessary storytelling and reporting. Today, we're going to catch up with 4 key people from some of the biggest true crime docuseries over the last few years. We'll find out how they're doing now and what happened once the cameras stopped rolling. We start with the documentary The Staircase, which first aired in the US all the way back in 2005, but became more widely known in 2018 after it aired with new episodes on Netflix. The documentary series covers the 2001 death of Kathleen Peterson and the subsequent trial of her husband, novelist Michael Peterson. We caught up with Peterson's original attorney, David Rudolph, to ask about some of the key players in the case and what he's up to now.
I spoke with Michael about a week or 10 days ago. He's still living in Durham. He is doing what all of us are doing, which is quarantining at home, although he does go out for like a 5-mile walk each day. Clayton is still in Baltimore working at the same company. And he and his wife have 2 children, Michael's grandchildren. Todd just recently started or was going to start a new job before the pandemic hit. He's back living in Chapel Hill now. And Martha is living in Salt Lake City, and Margaret is living in Los Angeles, and they're all doing well. I've been trying to repress my memories of Dwayne as much as I can, but the last I heard, he was working for some company in Texas, not doing any kind of forensic work, thank goodness. He appeared in the last episode of that Netflix series and did in fact indicate not only that he thought that if he tried the case again, he would not let that evidence in, and probably should not have back in 2003, which was sort of a bittersweet admission for me. But he also indicated that he thought a reasonable jury would have a reasonable doubt in the case. So I thought that was interesting. And I've got to say that I thought it was pretty courageous for Judge Hudson to admit all that on camera in a documentary. I think most judges would not have been willing to admit they made a mistake. And I think it's really important for your viewers to understand that judges make mistakes. Since the original episode came out, there's been lots of developments. I've done a few criminal defense cases, but mostly I've been doing wrongful conviction cases where I've been taking legal action against police officers who were responsible for misconduct, which led to wrongful convictions. And so that's pretty much been my focus over the last decade or so. And it's what I'm working on primarily now in terms of cases. Sonia Pfeiffer, who's my wife and law partner, she was back in 2003 a journalist covering the trial, and thereafter she went to law school. She moved up to Boston for a while to report, and then she went to UNC Law School. Then she joined the Public Defender's Office in Charlotte. We got married in 2000, I guess it was 7. And we have a 9-year-old daughter who's unfortunately very much like me. So she's very stubborn and opinionated. So we spend a lot of time arguing with her. And the podcast with Sonia is going to, again, focus on abuse of power. And we're doing that in conjunction with ACAST, which is a sort of global platform, and Campfire Productions, which is the production company out in California that did An Innocent Man documentary on Netflix. We're in the process of recording 10 episodes. I also have a contract with HarperCollins to write a book, not so much about the staircase, indeed not at all about the staircase, but about the abuses of power that lead to injustices in the criminal justice system.
Oxygen Sundays begin with Snapped.
This is her husband, and he's laying here dead.
You don't do that unless you're cold-hearted and you're evil.
She thrives on deception and manipulation.
Oxygen Sundays continue with Deadly Cults.
You could tell them to go out and kill somebody, and they would do it.
This has got to be some kind of cult.
Oxygen Sundays on the #1 true crime destination.
That's not a human being. That's a monster.
Oxygen Sundays begins at 6. Oxygen, true crime 24/7.
Welcome back. I hope everyone grabbed a snack and is ready to dive back in. First off, we'd like to share a video message from Corporal Bryson Listrup of the Lehigh City Police Department. You may know him as Officer Nene on TikTok or YouTube, but he won't be doing any dancing today. Instead, he wanted to take a moment to talk about the First Responders Children's Foundation and thank all of you guys for your support at home.
I am so grateful to be a part of this, and I am more grateful to the First Responders Children's Foundation for giving me the opportunity to help support first responders out there on the front lines. The First Responders Children's Foundation first reached out to me during the iHeartRadio living room concert. They asked me because of some of my following with social media on TikTok and Instagram and those kind of things as Officer Nene. When they told me about what they're doing, I knew that that was something bigger that I wanted to be part of. That was something bigger than me and something bigger than just what I'm doing as a police officer. And so to hear that they are out there, that there are people out there who care about my family and first responders' families all over the place, as much as we care about our own families, was heartwarming, and it was moving, and it was important. It was something that I knew I wanted to do. I'm amazed at some of the things I've heard. They've given over $2 million in emergency relief to first responders and their families. They've paid 16 funerals for first responders. They're securing hotel rooms to the tune of like 11,000, I believe, 11,000 hotel rooms that they've given to first responders so that We don't have to come home to our families and risk putting them at risk of COVID-19. It is incredibly important to support your first responders during this COVID-19 pandemic. We don't get the choice to stay home. We don't have the opportunity to not respond. Could you imagine if you called the police and we said, sorry, COVID-19, we can't help you. We can't do that, and we won't do that. But we need your support during this time, because we won't do that. We won't leave you hanging, so we don't want you to leave us hanging. We're doing everything we can to keep you guys safe, keep you healthy. From the fire department that keeps your houses safe and responds when houses are on fire to try to mitigate the loss so you still have a house to live in, to the EMS out there that are out there when you need medical care, to the police that are out here keeping you safe in your community, keeping those bad guys, the people who would wish to do you harm, at bay. We need your support. We need your trust, and we need you to just know we'll be there for you through everything. Support us in return, and let us continue to do our jobs and help us be able to do our jobs. However you can support us. Say hello to the next first responder you see. Say thank you to the next first responder you see. If you see a first responder and you have the monetary ability, buy them a meal, or donate right now. Donate so that we can get the funds where they're needed most, and we can help those people who are on the front lines. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for being part of this and enjoying crime. I mean, I enjoy crime, but thank you guys so much for your time with this CrimeCon. I hope it's a little bit weird. I know it's virtually, but I hope it is a memorable moment for you guys. I hope you enjoy the convention. I hope that you guys get some things out of this, and I hope you realize we're here for you. We'll still be here for you. See you guys later.
Our next guest is a former CIA operative and the New York Times bestselling author of Spy Secrets That Can Save Your Life. Jason Hansen is joining us from Utah. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Stephanie.
It's thank you so much for joining us. It's so nice to see you. You know, I've seen you on so many news outlets like the Today Show. I've had the chance to watch your appearance on Shark Tank, which was so cool. And what you do and teach people is so amazing.
I'm very blessed to be able to do what I love and share spy secrets with people. So obviously nobody wants to have a home invasion. Nobody wants to be kidnapped. So I share you the same techniques that spies use to keep out of trouble.
And I know today you're going to give us a little preview of what you want to show at CrimeCon in Orlando this fall. But it's my understanding you went up to the Spy Ranch just for us.
I did. I went out there. I shot 3 videos that show you some very neat and spy ways of escaping restraints. So you're going to see how to escape duct tape, how to escape rope, and some very spy methods that anybody can use to stay safe.
That's so interesting. Let's take a look.
I'm out here at our 320-acre spy ranch, and as you can see, I am duct taped to a chair. Why am I duct taped to a chair? Because during a home invasion, criminals love to duct tape people to chairs. So if you were to Google duct tape plus home invasions, you would see all kinds of crazy stories. What they do is they break into a home, duct tape people to the kitchen chair, and this is actually the kitchen chair from my home. Don't tell my wife. Once you are duct taped to the chair like this, they run upstairs, ransack your bedrooms, ransack your drawers, steal your jewelry, steal anything they can find, then come back and leave, or sometimes they come back and do bad things. So if heaven forbid you are ever duct taped to a chair, while that criminal's upstairs ransacking your master bedroom, I want to show you how to escape in seconds so you can flee to safety. So what a lot of people do is they find themselves here, they try and shimmy around, maybe they tip over, and that's no good because you're tipped over, duct taped to a chair. Instead, to escape lightning quick, if you find yourself in this position, you're going to jolt forward very fast as if you're putting your head between your legs. So if you've ever been on an airplane and you thought you were going to throw up and you put your head between your legs, grab that white baggie and start puking, that is the position you're going to assume. So here's how it looks, and hopefully we'll get out in seconds. I'm here, jolt forward, I'm out, and then I can run away to safety. And as you can see, I am tied up with a rope. There are many ways to escape rope, but I'm going to show you one neat way today. It involves paracord. Paracord, also called parachute cord, is very popular these days. Kids use it for bracelets, necklaces, belts, their paracord shoelaces, all kind of stuff. And if I were going overseas doing some of the private security work I do, and I was going to a dangerous place, I would have paracord everywhere, meaning I would have paracord shoelaces, I would have it on my backpack, I would have it on my, pretty much anywhere. I'd have it on my belt, I'd have it tucked into my pants. And the reason is because of the escape uses that paracord gives you. So if I were kidnapped and tied up, once I was at a safe place to escape, meaning there's not 10 guys around me with guns, meaning I'm in a room alone, I would pull out my paracord, I would thread it right between my hands, as you can see me now. Then I would take my paracord. I would put one loop over one of my feet, in this instance, my left foot. I would take the next loop, put it over my next foot, and then I would pretend to ride my bicycle. I would bicycle for maybe 10, 15 seconds, and lo and behold, I'm free because paracord will cut right through rope, which is pretty awesome. All right, as you can see, I'm duct tape out here at our 320-acre spy ranch, and I'm gonna show you how to escape duct tape easily if, heaven forbid, you're ever duct tape around the wrist. And this is very, very common all over the world. In fact, duct tape is the #1 way that criminals kidnap people, and it doesn't matter if you're in the United States, in Mexico, or elsewhere. Luckily, you can escape in literally less than 2 seconds. So to do that, you want to put your hands high above your head, just like I am. You want to pull down quick while separating your hands as if you're slapping your hips. Now, I know me explaining that is probably, clear as mud, so I'm going to do it and then go slow-mo. So I go up here, boom, just like that. All I did was my hands are here. I pull down and separate my hands as if I'm slapping my hips or elbowing somebody behind me. That is just one of the methods to escape duct tape easily. And at CrimeCon, I'm going to show you a whole lot more.
Jason, I myself was thinking I want to look and see if I have duct tape just to test those out at home myself, just to see, what it's like. But, for people at home who are practicing social distancing, is there a piece of advice you want for the true crime community, for folks who are, interested in hearing more during this trying time?
Interestingly enough, it's not necessarily physical security, it's digital security. So with everybody working from home, hackers are having a field day. I'm getting my phone ringing off the hook from people that have had their computer hacked and ransomware and so on. So I would say one of the easiest things that anybody can do is to use a VPN, which is a virtual private network. You can download it on your computer. It encrypts everything you're doing. So while criminals are driving around neighborhoods, which they're doing, trying to steal information, if you're using a VPN and your information is encrypted, you'll be safe. Well, unfortunately, everybody else won't be.
That's such an important point. Jason, I know that you're coming to CrimeCon in Orlando this upcoming fall. What do you have planned?
So I have a lot. I'm going to show you how to escape from a trunk, if heaven forbid you're ever in there. I'm going to show you my favorite self-defense tool, which I've carried on airplanes, I've carried in courthouses. It's very easy to use. I'm going to share some simple self-defense moves that can take out an attacker based on my CIA training, and how to pick locks, how to become a human lie detector. So there's going to be a ton that I'm going to cover with you.
I can't wait to see it. Thank you again for joining us here today. For more spy escape and evasion tips and tricks, you heard it from Jason. Be sure to catch him at CrimeCon in Orlando this fall from October 30th to November 1st. You may have seen Oxygen's season finale of Cold Justice. Like many of you at home, people behind some of your favorite Oxygen shows are social distancing. We recently caught up with Kelly Siegler to see what she's up to and how she thinks law enforcement and Cold Justice might be impacted by COVID-19. Take a look.
It's way less structured. I'm trying to tell myself we'll never get to do this again, where I have my babies at home and, playing puzzles, watching TV. Oh my God, I've cleaned my whole house. We did the yard this weekend. I was hoeing and raking and digging and pulling weeds. So I'm out of to-dos. I got to think of something else to do. Reading a lot. I don't cook. I'm a terrible cook. They don't want me to cook. I'm just a good cleaner. You know, our usual prep things that we do while we're home, we can't really do because we don't want to get in the middle of more important things they have going on right now. So we're just trying to stay out of it and wait until it's time to get back to work. I'm not worried about shaking hands and hugging people, but I'm sure a lot of people will be. It's going to be awkward until we figure that out. I mean, that's easy. As far as the show, here's the real concern. I feel like if we go out to these smaller counties all over the country and knock on a door too soon, or maybe even years from now, and they go, I'm not talking to you people, y'all might have the corona. I mean, that's a legitimate reason to not want to talk about a case, right? So there is that concern. Let's be realistic. I watch a lot of singing shows because I love that. It's easy. I have a lot of favorite shows, but The Voice is the easy one to listen to. Just put you in a good mood. And Kelly Clarkson, because she's from Texas, and Blake, they crack me up. So I think that would be my go-to show.
I'm Stephanie Gomolka with Oxygen.com, and we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the psychology and significance of a mark of a killer. I'm joined by Professor of Forensic Psychology at DeSales University, Dr. Catherine Ramsland, forensic psychologist Dr. Joni Johnston, and former FBI criminal profiler Mark Safrick. Thank you all so much for being here.
Happy to be here. Hello, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
You know, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the psychology and significance of a mark of a killer. Thank you all for joining us. Dr. Johnston, I want to start off with asking you, what is a mark of a killer?
The mark of a killer basically is a collection of rituals or behaviors that are necessary for the psychology, to understanding the psychology of the perpetrator. And so it's not something that necessarily is important to in actually perpetrating the crime. Is something that really meets some kind of psychological or emotional need for the perpetrator, which of course is then reflected in how the victim is treated.
Mark, from a law enforcement perspective, how does ritual or behavior of a perpetrator influence the investigation?
Well, I think what we're trying to do in these complex, typically serial investigations, is discern between an offender's MO, or their behavior that they engage in to be successful in the crime, and their ritualized or need-driven behavior. Because the MO tends to change over time. So if you have an offender that's acting out over years, you wouldn't expect the MO to be the same in the initial years as it is in the later years. But ritual or need-driven behavior tends to be fairly static. It can improve, but it generally tends to be there. So identifying from a law enforcement perspective both of those dynamics within a series of crimes is very important.
Dr. Ramsland, I'm interested to get your perspective on this. Is ritualized behavior or a signature something that's common in serial killers?
Well, I think that it can be nuanced. I think you're going to find personal stamp from really any criminal. The important thing is trying to link the crimes so that you can see if you do in fact have a serial killer and perhaps can predict future events. But you'll find behavior being very individualized. If it's ritual, for example, it addresses a sexual need or a sexual preference, that's going to be a little bit more distinct, I think, than something more nuanced. But I think everybody pretty much leaves a signature because of who they are.
Can you give an example? And it could be something small. I know we'll talk about, Gacy more in a bit about, what exactly was a signature and maybe what was, the fantasy or the reason behind it.
Well, a posing, for example, is if a serial killer poses their victim in a way that's humiliating, in a sexual position, perhaps nude, perhaps they want to make a statement or they want to shock whoever finds the victim. Or we had one where the killer removed the eyeballs of his victims, which was pretty dramatic, but very clearly a linkage. Dumping them in the street as another one. It's a sort of statement on them being nothing but trash.
Mark, you are in the episode of Oxygen's Mark of a Killer that's focused on John Wayne Gacy, which is available to stream now. But I want to ask you, what was Gacy's signature in that case?
Well, I think it's when we talk about signature, you can have these repetitive behaviors, both in MO and in the ritualized behavior, which then becomes the signature. So you generally don't have signature unless you have multiple crimes. Of course, with Gacy, you have a huge number of crimes. You can also find this behavior that is common to this particular individual in the ritual, which is where you typically find it, but you can also find it in the MO. And in Gacy's case, this whole putting the clothing down the throat may actually, I think it probably started out as an MO behavior in terms of keeping these victims from screaming. But as time went on, I think he enjoyed doing that. And it essentially sort of morphed into this need-driven behavior. But you can find it in both. And in Gacy's, I think it actually goes from an MO initially to a ritualized need-driven behavior.
Does recognizing that help you and law enforcement create a criminal profile, excuse me, sorry.
Absolutely. So you're looking at not only these behaviors, but you're looking at victimology, you're looking at access, you're looking at risk level, both for the victim and for the offender. You're looking at weapon use and injuries. And all of these dynamics together are pieces of the puzzle that you are putting together. And because you have a history of studying individuals like this and looking at similar behaviors in other offenders, it gives you an idea about the type of personality, the type of individual that you might be looking for.
Dr. Ramsland, Gacy is described as a leader in his community, a family man. Yet when I was watching Mark of a Killer, he doesn't even seem to comprehend a question about remorse from investigators. So I want to ask you, what does it mean, towards the psychology of Gacy?
Well, Gacy's psychology was interesting because he already had created the idea that maybe he had multiple personality disorder, which is now called dissociative identity disorder. He already had planned ahead to try to figure out how he could dupe people. He had been duping people for a long time. He lived what we call a compartmentalized life, where he passed as normal, even gregarious, the life of the party, good neighbor, a successful businessman, politically connected, dressed as a clown to entertain kids, while he was also killing teenagers and young men and burying bodies in his basement. He was married. Sometimes his mother lived in the house, but he was able to pass as a normal human being while keeping this very dark and horrible secret. Even when people noticed the smell, he could cover it up. In terms of remorse, it's likely that he just did not have the depth of feeling to care about what he was doing to these individuals. He thought they deserved it. So he could easily justify in his own mind that what he was doing really wasn't that bad. In that case, he probably wouldn't feel any remorse for it.
Yeah, and I think it's something that the show really dives into and explores as well. Dr. Johnson, you've been featured and shared your insights on several cases with Oxygen's Mark of a Killer. I want to ask you, what drew you to the show and why did you want to take part?
I thought the show was very fascinating from a couple of different perspectives. One is typically as a psychologist, when we look for clues into somebody's personality or psyche or whatever, we're looking at early childhood kind of experiences, traumas, how they got along with peers, relationships with families. And yet at the same time, as a private investigator, I know that when we look at crime scenes and crime scene behaviors, we can also discover a lot about a perpetrator's fantasies and personalities. And one of the things I loved about Mark of a Killer is it does kind of look at both aspects, because it looks at these crime scene behaviors which offer us clues to their, again, fantasies and personalities and psyches. And it also, to some extent, ties in some of these crime scene behaviors to their early childhood and life experiences. And so I was really fascinated by the fact that this show really does emphasize kind of why somebody does something and looking at those kind of psychological needs and emotional needs that drive them.
The upcoming episode of Mark of a Killer is set to take a look at a case in Alaska, Robert Hansen. Can you tell us a little bit about that case?
Robert Hansen is another example of someone who kind of led a double life. He ran a bakery, he was married, he had 2 kids. He would primarily troll for victims or go out and look for victims when his family was out of town or not available. And he was a serial killer who operated in the late 1970s and earlier 1980s. And he was basically a hunter of humans. He was a big game hunter in general. He had trophies all over his house. He took a lot of pride in the fact that he had some records for the largest animals in certain categories. And he would basically go pick up or find ways to lure dancers or women working as sex workers to his house. He would kidnap them, take them to his basement, torture them, assault them, and then literally fly them on a plane to this remote part of the wilderness where he would go and hunt big game as well, release them, and then hunt them down as if they were animals.
For that case, what would his mark be considered as?
It's interesting. This is a case also, I think, where you have MO behaviors as well as some signatures. And I think his whole signature really is being a hunter. He's somebody who collects trophies. He hunts them with high-powered rifles. He takes them out in the wilderness where he does hunting. And I think this kind of conglomeration of behaviors really is his signature and also has some components of his MO.
You know, Mark, I want to ask, you know, when you're looking at so many cases in hindsight, you know, we notice those marks or those rituals. As an investigator, can a signature or a mark or a ritual help identify that a homicide is the work of a serial killer earlier on?
I think that's what you're actually trying to do when you have multiple cases. And then if you get this rather aberrant behavior in a crime scene, like for instance, in Hansen's case, you have victims that are shot, but then redressed post-mortem, which is an interesting dynamic. And then also these victims are buried in shallow graves. And you wonder, why do you need to bury a victim when you're out literally in the middle of nowhere? You don't see it with other offenders. But all of these dynamic aspects are very important when you're trying to put together, you know, the profile, both the personality profile, demographic aspects of the case. These are all very important pieces.
Yes. Thank you all for joining us. We also have a sneak peek of that upcoming episode of Mark of the Killer. Take a look.
During the course of time that we were watching Hansen under surveillance, night and day, we didn't notice anything amiss. He was running his business, he was going home, he was going to the store and doing things like a normal person would.
A serial killer will kill somebody, and this fulfills a lot of fantasies that he has. And oftentimes he feels kind of satiated afterwards. He has a cooling off period of time. However, it's temporary. This compulsion, this intensity builds up, and he begins thinking about killing again.
My opinion was that where we were now, with him under surveillance, was too soon in time, that nothing's going to happen this time when his family's gone, but next time, watch out.
I lived right next to Bob. We were friends, and we hunted together as often as we could. A skilled hunter needs to be able to be silent and quiet in the woods. You have to be in real good shape. You have to, become part of their environment in order to be successful.
Robert Hansen is able to wear different faces depending upon who he's with. It's impossible to look at someone, to look at their behavior on a day-to-day basis and identify a serial killer. They're oftentimes walking among us. They have families, they have good jobs. And so until we can identify those crimes and start putting the links together, we can't identify a serial killer.
Robert's Bakery was very popular. Occasionally I'd stop and buy donuts and say, "Hi, Bob, how you doing?" In fact, the police used it as the donut stop. Nobody had any idea that Baker Bob was also a serial killer.
During the course of that surveillance, I said, well, here's a wife and 2 children. How could she not know?
While we all compartmentalize certain things that we have to kind of function, it would be very difficult for most of us to compartmentalize to this extent. It would take somebody, and I think Robert Hansen is that person, who really doesn't have a conscience, who really isn't bothered by empathy, remorse, guilt. So for him, it's easy to do these horrible things, justify them to himself, and leave all that behind when he gets back in his plane and flies home.
The killer wanted a place where he could have them run and chase them and hunt them down. This was part of his satisfaction in doing what he did. Couldn't do it in town. The wilderness was necessary for that to happen.
He was a monster, but the community didn't perceive him that way. They had no idea.
He appeared to be just a normal guy next door, and I remember my wife and I going over to see their home and being in the basement where he held these women. That was the spot where he chained them to that post. And that's a little strange when you think back on it.
Thank you, Mark, Dr. Ramslin, and Dr. Johnston for joining us. For anyone watching at home, you can learn more about Hansen and the case by watching Mark of the Killer on Saturdays at 7, 6 Central on Oxygen. Stay with us.
This serial killer has the correct astrological sign of each of the victims, which was insane.
Those square knots screamed out, "I've got something important to tell you about this killer."
He called in the same way and used the same weepiness.
Oh yeah, finally I just stabbed somebody with a knife stick.
He was following a set pattern.
He's looking for recognition. I am here. I am someone to contend with.
I tell people I had a sister. Oh, how did she pass? She was killed by a serial killer.
He hunts women the same way a hunter views other animals. This is his mark.
It's clearly need-driven ritual behavior.
My thoughts were, I am going to get this guy.
Mark of a Killer. New next Saturday at 7, 6 Central. Oxygen. True crime 24/7.
Hi, CrimeCon fans. Nancy Grace here, working away in my basement. A lot of people have been asking, what have you been doing on lockdown? Well, I've been taking care of 2 guineas, a cat, a dog, my 89-year-old mother, 1 husband, and 2 twins who are homeschooling. And doing Fox Nation, Sirius XM, crime stories. Oh, that's pretty much it, except my biggest task you're about to see. Come here. Come here. Mostly we've been arguing about what movie we're going to watch at night. That takes up most of my time. He and I like murder mysteries. She likes like teen angst, My First Kiss, blah, blah, blah. Once in a while a murder mystery. She's into that. But mostly we spend our time arguing about what movie we're going to watch. Can we all at least 3 agree on that? And also, we've been playing a lot of games. Stupid Murders is my favorite. What's your favorite game we play?
I don't know.
You like Old Maid and Go Fish. What's your favorite?
It's that fact game we did last night. Fact. Sorry.
Please don't say fat in this
Okay.
house. That's the F word. We don't say that. Fact. He's trying to say Trivial Pursuit. See? That's what's happening here. And while we argue about what movie every night, what would I do without them? Stay safe, everybody. See you at CrimeCon.
Continuing now with our series of catch-ups with key figures from true crime documentaries, Jan Broberg was featured in the Netflix docuseries Abducted in Plain Sight that chronicled her family's membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as well as her own kidnappings at the age of 12 and then again at 14 by a close family friend, Robert Berchtold. You may have seen Jan at CrimeCon last year in New Orleans. We also spoke to her recently to find out what's been happening in her life and what she wants to share about everything she's gone through.
Hey, it's really great to be back in touch with all of those CrimeCon fans out there, and really I'm excited to tell you all that since Abducted in Plain Sight aired on Netflix, we've been able to actually do a lot of good. We're really out there still trying to educate and help kids who have been affected by child sexual abuse, but also to educate people in general, because, it's not usually a scary stranger. It's somebody you know, you love, you trust. So that's kind of been our life since this all started. We just signed a contract to start working on a series that will come out, plus the book, Abducted in Plain Sight. So there's going to be more opportunities, I think, for us to continue this work. It was really hard, I think, when it all came out at first, because a lot of people who really maybe have never had an experience of being conned or manipulated by someone close to them. If you haven't had that experience, it was easy for people to kind of point their finger, blame my parents or blame somebody else. And that was really hard on me, because I have great parents and I would never have survived without them and their constant love and encouragement and willingness to be honest and to talk it out and all those things. So it's been a wild ride, but we survived all of those negative Nellies out there, and have decided it's worth it. As long as people are talking about this, then the reason that we did it was well worth it. You have to want and believe that you can escape that life sentence. First and foremost, you have to believe that you can take off the big, heavy coat that is labeled victim, that you can actually take it off and you can hang it up. And if you need to put it back on to feel safe, you can do that. I think talking about it and knowing you're not alone is huge. I think people can have a happy childhood at any age. So even if yours wasn't fabulous, like mine, had some problems, I hope that you'll stand for yourself and that you'll find your way. Again, you have to decide that you want the help and that you deserve it, because you do.
The first CrimeCon in 2017 was, the producers tell me, a test to see if fans would really be interested in a weekend devoted to all things true crime. They say the speakers who went to Indy that year took a risk that anyone would even show up. But one speaker in particular stood out, not only for taking a chance on a new event, but also for his incredible openness with attendees and his unwavering support for CrimeCon ever since. Dateline NBC's Josh Mankiewicz has since become known as the mayor of CrimeCon, and for the last 2 years, the mayor, to the delight of many, has convinced his Dateline colleagues to join him at each CrimeCon. So we thought it would only be fitting to have one of those colleagues join us from his home to formally introduce him. Here now is Dateline NBC's Keith Morrison.
Thank you, Stephanie. And hello to everybody at CrimeCon at home. My, you could have fun with that phrase, couldn't you? I've been asked to introduce my old friend, Mank. And, well, now that's a task, isn't it? Mank is a myth. He's a legend. He has his black belt in snark. He's working very hard at that grumpy look. And really, when it comes down to it, who better to talk about Mank, or who more accomplished at it, than Mankiewicz himself? So here he is, my pal, Josh.
Well, thank you, Keith. I have to begin by saying I'm sorry that we all didn't just see each other at CrimeCon, because this is when it was supposed to be just a couple of days ago. And I very much hope that we're going to see as many of you as possible at CrimeCon in Orlando in the fall. So we're here today to talk about a bunch of different things. One of them is I just finished 25 years at Dateline, which went by like that. And so thank you for all of that, because I certainly couldn't have done it without all of you who are our fans. I've also just finished a podcast, which has just come out. The new episodes, first 2 episodes available this past Thursday, May the 7th. And it's called Motive for Murder. It's already the #1 podcast in America, and kind of counting on all of you to keep it there. So we're releasing 2 episodes now, and then we'll release 1 episode every week on Thursdays. And this is a story that some people who watch Dateline a lot are going to remember. It's a story about about 2 murders that happened in Houston back in 2012. And they seem to be connected, even though they didn't happen on the same day, and they didn't happen in the same place. And the 2 victims, they had a connection, but the theories that fit one victim didn't fit the theories of why the second murder was committed. And so this became as much a sort of a struggle to figure out what the motive was, as much as who the actual killer was. And that is what led investigators on such a long and twisted trail of investigation and numerous suspects. And one of the things, all of you who watch Dateline regularly will understand, this was a case that sort of didn't fit the typical Dateline template. Wasn't the husband, wasn't the wife, wasn't the boyfriend, wasn't the girlfriend, wasn't the husband or wife of the boyfriend and girlfriend, wasn't the insurance money. So this is something where investigators really had to think long and hard about this, because it sort of didn't seem typical, and it definitely wasn't. It's quite a story with a lot of twists and turns, and we thought at the time that it would make a great podcast. So we started recording material for the podcast and reporting that. At the same time, we were recording and taping the Dateline 2-hour in Houston last year. So we were shooting all of that sort of at the same time, both audio and video. And then we put the TV broadcast on last fall, and then we've been working on the podcast ever since, and we just finally finished it. I'm actually not 100% finished right now. I'm still putting the finishing touches on episodes 5 and 6. So you're getting this very close to when we finish it. So again, that is Motive for Murder. It is available wherever you get your podcasts. And you can download the first 2 episodes right now. So let's see, what else are we here to talk about? I know we're here because some of you have questions, which, as you know, we're always happy to hear from you. I love going to CrimeCon because I love hearing what you're all thinking. I love hearing how well we disguise the twists and turns in the story. Somebody at CrimeCon last year said to me, the first guy you show us is never the guy. And I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. So I immediately wrote one in which the first guy was the guy. So if you're wondering about whether or not your feedback in those conversations make a difference, they do. One last thing I'm going to say about the podcast. One of the great things about the podcast is that even in a 2-hour Dateline, there's stuff we have to leave out. And in a podcast where you don't have to worry about hitting the station breaks at the top and bottom of the hour, and you're not held to a finite amount of time, there's a lot more stuff we can put in. And so doing this podcast was very sort of freeing, and it was fun. It led to a different kind of storytelling, one that I hope you guys are going to listen to and enjoy. And whether you do or don't, I'm pretty sure you're going to let me know. So let's, without further ado, let's go to some questions from all of you.
Hi, Josh. It's Leslie, staying home here in Phoenix, Arizona. Who do you admire most in the true crime industry?
Okay, so who do I admire most in the crime industry? Well, the easy answer is Keith, because he's so iconic, so great at this. And he's like created a brand within a brand, But the answer to who I really admire most in the true crime industry is the people we interview, is the cops who don't give up on this, who take the file home with them for the weekend, on vacations, when they retire, when they move to a new job, because that kind of dedication by law enforcement is one of the things that makes Dateline work. And who do I admire in the true crime industry? Well, people who don't consider themselves part of the true crime industry. the families of the people that we speak with, the people who open up their homes, their hearts, their lives, and their sorrows to us, because it is that kind of storytelling, and it is that sort of it's that sort of connection that we have with the people we interview that makes Dateline work. And it's why you like to watch Dateline, because it's real and because we're talking to real people about real things that happen to them. And in addition to the fact that you see these like horrible things that have happened to people, you also see these tremendous stories of strength and resilience. And that's very heartening sometimes. So that's the answer to that, who do I most admire. The next question is going to be a live question from Kendall.
Hey, Josh.
Hi there.
So my question is, if you could cover any true crime case in history, which one would you choose?
JFK. I mean, it's the story that it's the story that in the modern era launched conspiracy theories. And out of a zillion conspiracy theories that are out there about all kinds of different crimes, from ones you've heard of to ones you have, that's sort of one of the few that I have been persuaded that, you know, I don't know about a conspiracy theory, but I've always believed that there was more there than we were being told. And, you know, there's so much going on there. I mean, who was waiting for President Kennedy in Dallas? And then what happened in the subsequent investigation? And who was really to blame? What was Lee Harvey Oswald's involvement, if any? Who profited by President Kennedy being killed? That's a story that, in my view, like, we don't know enough about. And even though it's been all these years, I'd still like to find out more about it than I already know. And you, I've been told that you have another question. You can't stop it.
I do.
You know,
I do. I'm a huge fan. Like, my husband makes fun of me when we watch Dateline because I can always tell him when it's going to be like coming up. Like, watch it every week. So,
okay. All right. Two things. One, shame on your husband for making fun of you for watching Dateline. It's actually one of the best things you could possibly be doing. Two, Stephen King once said, I think in Under the Dome, that murder is like potato chips. You can't stop with just one. So you're the same way. You're the same way about questions. You can't stop with just one.
Okay, what is the wildest thing that has happened to you while you've been on assignment?
Well, we've been caught in natural disasters. I know that. I mean, Keith went to, I think went to Houston for a story and then got trapped there by a hurricane. What is the wildest thing that happened to me? You know, usually when we're interviewing somebody who's incarcerated, either pending trial or after they've been sentenced, usually what you don't see on Dateline is that there are corrections officers just out of camera range, and they are there in case the person gets upset. So I was doing an interview, this was about 2 years ago, and we were in a state where our producer had really good relationships with the people who ran the state correctional system. And so, you know, they were happy to let us in, and they set up this interview between a guy who'd been convicted, and I'm interviewing this guy. And in the middle of the interview, the guy gets upset that I'm asking him questions, which might have suggested that he was guilty, since in fact he had been found guilty. And he started yelling at me. And I suddenly realized that all the corrections officers were not next to us, as they frequently are. They were out in the hallway. And this guy was getting progressively more angry. And I thought, this guy's going to kick my ass. And I could sense the crew around me kind of like tensing up, because they sort of thought like a fist fight was coming. And this guy was not shackled. He was just sitting across from me about 3 or 4 feet away. Anyway, I definitely was sort of ready for what felt like an impending fist fight, which just let me say would have been very short if I was involved. I'll let you wonder about which way that would have gone. But fortunately, the guy like thought better of it and managed to control himself and did not throw a punch or in any way become aggressive. And he calmed down, and we ended up doing the interview. And it was fine. That's probably one of the craziest things that happened to me, because I thought for just a minute, this is going to be the most memorable Dateline interview ever. The one where Josh gets body slammed.
Hi, Josh. This is Erin from Sandwich, Mass. I had a question for you. I wondered how often the 5 of you from Dateline actually ever got to be in the same room together. Thanks.
How often do we all actually get together? We're not that often in the same place. If we had done CrimeCon just a few days ago, that would have been one of them. We're usually together sometime in the fall, when we sort of, we're usually together sometime in the fall when we take that team picture that they run, at commercial breaks and on promotional things where we're standing on, 2 levels of that warehouse. And I always can't decide whether we look more like a small personal injury law firm or an ad for the Joseph A. Bank fall line. But it's always one of those. It's Lester and Andrea and me and Dennis and Keith. And so we're there for the photos. We're always together at CrimeCon. And there's usually like one other event a year, some kind of either a fan event or something to kick off the season when we're all together. But we're not together very often. I mean, the people on Dateline that I see the least are the other correspondents, because they're off doing their stories and I'm off doing my stories. Occasionally when I'm in New York, I bump into Andrea, who works there, or I'll see Lester. But Keith and I and Dennis and Andrea are generally in different orbits all over the place, sometimes all over the globe. So I don't see them very often, not as much as I wish I did.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I'm Amanda, staying at home here in sunny Florida, your favorite. And my question for you is, which speaker or expert would you love to see at a future CrimeCon?
Okay, it's important to remember that I'm only the honorary mayor of CrimeCon, so there's no need to address me as Your Honor, unless you want to. But who would I most like to see as a speaker at future CrimeCons? I'm going to say John Lewin, Assistant District Attorney here in Los Angeles, who's prosecuting Robert Durst, and who is probably the last person in the world I would want coming after me if I had committed some crime. I think he'd be great. This question was sent in by Paul in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I understand that when the CrimeCon producers called him to talk, they realized that Paul's bedside nurse, that he's a bedside nurse in a COVID unit. So, Paul, thank you for all that you're doing and for risking your life for the rest of us, because your service is as valuable as anybody's right now. That's noble work that you're doing. So thank you for doing that, and please, be careful, stay safe. Thank you for your support of us, but we hope that we're supporting you too. Here's Paul's question. You and Keith have a special way of letting the person you're interviewing know that you think they're full of something. He says, that's why I love you both. Is that intentional? How do you keep your emotions checked when interviewing these people? Okay. Keith and I are human beings too. And frequently by the time we're talking to somebody who may not be telling us the truth, we've already met and interviewed the people that they left behind, whose lives might be sort of irretrievably shattered by what they did, by what the person that we're interviewing did. So, it's kind of hard to keep your knowledge out of that interview. But at the same time, you got to be fair to them, just like you're fair to everybody else. But, what's fair? Does that mean not letting them know that, I don't believe anything you're saying? Or, I'm always willing to listen to somebody's story of why they're not guilty or why they're framed or why it's all a big conspiracy or I didn't have anything to do with it. It's a mistake. The cops are out to get me or my wife's family's out to get me. Fine. I'm going to let you say that. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try to poke holes in that. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to let you say that uncritically. You're not here to give a speech, pal. You're here to answer for what you did, or at least what you're accused of doing. And if you don't have a good answer for that, this interview is not going to go well for you. So, when somebody says to me something that sounds preposterous, Clearly I'm not terribly good at keeping that out of my expression, and I don't think Keith is either. And I'm actually okay with that. Paul, be careful out there.
Hi, I'm Candace. I'm staying safe at home in Los Angeles.
And I'm your sister Amanda, and I'm staying safe at home in Denver.
So we have a two-part question for you. The first part is, what is the process like in finding a case for motive for a murder?
And how does your selection criteria vary for what makes a good podcast case versus on-air case?
Well, the answer to that question is maybe a little harder than I'm ready for here. Any good story, well told, is going to find an audience. That's sort of what I've always believed. It's one reason 60 Minutes was so popular and has been for so many years. A good story, well told, is going to find an audience. So that's true of podcasts and Dateline hours as well. I was saying this before at the top of this, which is, even if we're doing a Dateline 2-hour, there's still stuff we have to leave out. Like, let's say I'm talking about the way in which somebody was sentenced. Well, if I want to explain that during a Dateline broadcast, I think to myself, okay, I can do that. But that's going to be me talking for like 45 seconds. That's on TV. That's a very long time to have to just listen to somebody explaining something to you. So more often, we figure out a way to sort of tell that in shorthand. Not so in a podcast, because if I can tell it in an interesting way, it's much easier to do. And again, it doesn't matter whether the podcast episode that you're doing is 19 minutes long or 23 minutes long or 28 minutes long or 32 minutes long. It sort of can be the length that you need it to be to tell a story. Dateline stories are a little harder to pick because they've got to have a certain amount of suspense in them. And the people in them have to be willing to talk with us. At least some of them do. Maybe not everybody, but some of them do. So, a story in which the obvious suspect ends up being the guilty party, that's a very tough story to tell. Much easier and much better is when, just in storytelling terms, is if the obvious suspect ends up not being the guilty party. Then you've got some arc to the story, and then we can, as storytellers, Dennis and Keith and Andrea and I can sort of lead you around some corners, and that is fun. And one of the things that we also do, that we have to do when we're telling these stories, is we have to separate the storytelling from the story, and we're going to draw a line between that, because the storytelling is fun. We can make you think it's one person. We can make you think it's another person. Of course, at the end, we're sort of bound by the truth here. And, we're obviously not going to say it was one person if it wasn't. But if somebody was under suspicion, we can definitely talk about that. But that all has to be separate from the story, because there's nothing fun or amusing or entertaining about the story. The story is always deadly serious, and it's one of the worst things that happened. And it's frequently the worst thing that happened to somebody that we're interviewing. And we always need to respect that. So that's sort of the difference between storytelling and story. And we have to strike that balance in every single Dateline, and we have to do it in podcasts too.
Hi, Josh. It's Allison from Brookfield, Connecticut. So, Josh, I'm just wondering, we know that Keith was the trailblazer in podcasting, and he hit #1 on the charts. How annoying do you think he'll be if for some reason you don't also hit #1?
Let me just say that Keith has this ability to be annoying regardless of our relative standings in the podcast world. No, that's not true. He's actually as happy as I am that Motive for Murder is today the #1 podcast in America. I'm counting on all of you to keep it that way. Keith is as big a cheerleader as you would want. He's always the first to email me and say, great story, you did a great job last night. You came in first. Congratulations. He's wonderful to work with. I actually wish I saw him more. Yeah, it's definitely true that the thing about Pam, which was so good, set a standard for Dateline podcasts. And it's one that we're all going to have to meet from now on out. Fortunately, we're #1 right now. Thank you. I'm counting on all of you to keep us that way. Thanks for asking questions, and thanks for being here. And I hope we see you all at CrimeCon in person at the end of October 30th. Hoping that happens. And in the meantime, everybody stay safe, wear your masks, stay home if that's what the guidelines tell you. Please, all of you, be safe, stay safe. Thanks for all the loyalty.
Justice is now available 24/7.
Go make it happen. Y'all want to go arrest her?
I do.
Lock in with episodes of Cold Justice.
We got a felony warrant for your arrest.
Do time alongside the OG in Ice Cold Blood with Ice-T.
Sex, money, murder. True stories of America's lustful killers.
And of course, no sentence is complete without Snapped.
Is she really that crazy?
Justice is always available on Oxygen. True crime 24/7.
My YouTube channel has way more subscribers.
Yeah, well, my channel has more cases covered.
Look, we're not going to figure out who's better like this.
You're right. We should let them decide.
Join us on Crime After Crime, our monthly podcast where I tell way better stories than John.
I think you mean the monthly podcast where we go head to head. One topic, 2 stories, or a crime after crime, and there can be only one winner. Who decides? You do.
Join us on the 1st of every month and vote for me.
Who's in the lead right now?
Who's the winner of season 1?
We need your help. Find Crime After Crime wherever your favorite podcasts can be found, or watch and subscribe on YouTube. Learn more at www.crimeaftercrimepodcast.com.
And still vote for me.
Thank you to our friends over at CrimeCon for letting us drop in, and we hope you'll stop by and meet us live at CrimeCon in Orlando.
Hey true crime fans, I'm Sandra Young at Oxygen, and I'm super excited to tell you about the 2nd season of Accident Suicide Murder. The premiere episode is tonight at 6, and let me tell you, this case is bananas. In 2011, Ellen Greenberg was found dead in her apartment. She was 27 years old, had recently gotten engaged, had the world at her fingertips. She had a job that she loved as a school teacher, super tight network of family and friends. She was found by her fiance and the police with 20 stab wounds in her body. In fact, a chef's knife was still found in her chest when her body was discovered. Immediately, the police ruled her death a suicide. After the autopsy, the medical examiner ruled it a homicide. And you gotta stay tuned to see what happens, but I can guarantee there are a lot of twists and turns coming and an unexpected ending that will have the hair on your arms standing up.
The truth about whether Ellen Greenberg was murdered or died by suicide appeared to hinge on the findings of an outside expert. The expert focused on a stab wound on the back of Ellen's neck.
There was a stab wound that involved a portion of her spinal cord, but it was not severe enough to render her immediately paralyzed. She still could have gone on to inflict the other wounds herself.
In a remarkable turn of events, nearly 3 months after Ellen's fatal stabbing, the medical examiner changed the ruling from homicide to suicide.
There were several facts that certainly indicated a suicide. They were the superficial stab wounds to the portions of the body. That typically does not happen in a homicidal case. I have seen other people who've stabbed themselves and cut themselves multiple times. It's rare, it's not unheard of. It is not physically impossible for someone to inflict that on themselves.
In revising his ruling, the ME agreed with the police that Ellen Greenberg took her own life.
20 self-inflicted wounds from front and back. Suicide? Really?
Once the medical examiner enters a ruling that a case is a suicide, the police investigation is over. Unless some new witness comes forward, some new information develops, this matter is a closed case.
None of this was discussed with us by a policeman, a district attorney, a medical examiner.
Ellen's parents refused to accept the new ruling, so they launched their own investigation.
There was a brief period where I believed the police. That's how I grew up. I feel terrible saying all this. I believe them, that she committed suicide. But no more. Not even a hint of suicide.
I requested the crime scene photos, the autopsy report. That's how I was piecing it together, but not understanding who to talk to ask the questions.
In January of 2012, a year after Ellen's death, the couple recruited an expert in pathology to help them figure out the science.
We decided to hire a pathologist who would be able to interpret the crime scene findings. We wanted a professional's opinion.
The expert pathologist that the Greenbergs had hired to look at Ellen's file told me that he didn't know how authorities here in Philadelphia had written this case off as a suicide, given the number and nature of Ellen's stab wounds.
I spoke to him on the phone. He believes that this was consistent with homicide.
In May 2012, armed with their expert's report, the Greenbergs met with police officials. Investigators weren't swayed.
They don't like to meet with people. They don't like to explain what they do. So here you have a case that was a suicide, then it was a homicide, now it's a suicide. They don't want to talk about it. Plain and simple.
That was the day that I realized I wanted her name cleared. I did not want Ellen to be associated with suicide when she did not commit suicide.
Back to our series of updates from Big True Crime Docs, we move now to the Emmy-nominated true crime documentary, The Keepers, a series that riveted fans around the globe in 2017 and revolved around one question: who killed Sister Kathy Sesnick? But just because the series is over doesn't mean the investigation is. Gemma Hoskins, the amateur sleuth and former student of Sister Kathy, who was prominently featured in The Keepers, continues her search for answers.
Hi everybody, welcome to my home. It's good to have all of you together. Hope you're all being safe. And I can't believe that it's actually been 3 years since The Keepers was released. So raise your hand if you've seen it more than once. How many of you actually raised your hand? Anyway, I have a lot to share with you because a lot has happened since May of 2017. A good and a bad result was that we have had many more survivors of clergy abuse come forward. Now, that is very sad, but the good thing is that I believe that it was the courage of the women in The Keepers who were willing to show their faces and talk about what happened to them that has encouraged so many people to come forward. So in Maryland, just as happened in Pennsylvania, the Attorney General, Brian Frosh, has begun a criminal investigation into specifically clergy abuse in Maryland. Now, the criminal investigator is a wonderful guy named Richard Wolf. He has, for the last 18 months, been taking reports from everybody who has been willing to talk to him. And if you are one of those people in Maryland that needs to share that with him, I invite you to do that. One kind of odd connection we've been able to make is that Joseph Maskell and some of his cronies were actually using the same mind control therapies that were used in the CIA MK Ultra program. We also have learned that Christian Richter, who was the gynecologist to whom Maskell took a number of girls, was actually a handler for MK Ultra. And we've corroborated the equipment that Richter used by talking to a medical assistant that worked in his office. Richter is dead, but it's still pretty remarkable that we now have this way bigger connection. The last thing I want to tell you about is that I have a book coming out this summer. The name of it is Keeping On. And in the book, I talk about what brought me to this place. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still kicking butt, and I am still determined to find out what happened to Sister Kathy and do everything I can to help the survivors. So that's the update from me. Watch for more, and please be safe, stay home, be well, and please be kind to each other. That's it from Gemma from Ocean City. Bye.
Get your drink of choice ready, whether it's a martini or a nice seltzer. Next up, we have the co-hosts of Martinis and Murder, John Thrasher and Darren Karp, joining us.
Hey everyone, it's John and Darren from Martinis and Murder. John, this is like kind of mage because I know that you have like this blank background, but you can kind of see like I'm a little vulnerable right now. You can see my apartment at CrimeCon.
I love it. I love all the artwork behind you. I moved my desk around so you could only see the white background behind me. So you're not getting a peek into this house. Not today, at least.
Damn it.
I know. By the way, how amazing is this? We, unfortunately, we're supposed to be at CrimeCon last weekend, I believe, basking in the sun of Florida.
We're going to be in Harry Potter world, all that
Something.
I mean, it's okay, though. It's okay because the awesome people at CrimeCon have done this sort of amazing thing, and we can just bring CrimeCon to you, which is the ultimate lazy CrimeCon, and I'm into it.
So we're so excited. Thank you to CrimeCon for having us for CrimeCon at home. We really miss you guys. We hope to maybe one day see everybody out and about at a real CrimeCon again in the future. But Darren, there's something really cool that CrimeCon is doing this year. CrimeCon at Home's partnered with First Responders Children's Foundation to raise money for their COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund. Incredible. So it's like not only are we getting CrimeCon at Home, it's for a good cause. So to donate or learn more, please visit crimecon.givesmart.com, or you can text CrimeCon to 76278, and you'll get all the details about how you can give back and enjoy CrimeCon at the same time.
All my martini murder money this month is going to go. All my bail money that I've been saving for Matt the bartender is going to go to COVID relief, because I feel like it's okay if Matt just sits in jail, right?
Well, speaking of which, I love that transition because Matt the bartender is here. He's running our beautiful visuals that you're seeing here on the screen. We did want to do a special mini episode of the live show that we would have been doing in Orlando had we been there. And before we get to the case, it is Martinis and Murder after all. So Darren, what are you drinking at home in quarantine right now?
At home in quarantine, I have decided, normally I'm doing vodka sodas,
Right.
I love a Moscow Mule. But today, we had really sunny weather over the weekend. Now it's a little bit chillier, so I'm just doing bourbon neat. No rocks, bourbon neat, gonna warm me up. I'm ready to swig it, but John, what are you drinking?
Funny you say that. Bourbon neat.
Oh, give it a heavy pour.
Not too heavy. I got to get through some of our research here today.
Well, can we at least cheers, bitch?
Cheers, bitch. And to Matt behind the screen, cheers to you as well.
What we hope is not drinking and sober, because we actually have to have him run tech today. So.
Yes, exactly.
Let's get into it, right?
Yeah, let's get into this case. I want to hear more about what's happening here.
Yeah, so this case is about a guy named Richard Speck, which some of you may have already heard of. I know my parents have heard of it. It's a pretty kind of like the first serial killer. So let's get right into it. Back in Chicago in 1966, so we're talking many moons ago, back when Matt was in his middle age.
Right.
Speck, was a man with kind of a pockmarked face, so he clearly had acne, and a tattoo that read "Born to Raise Hell," which is now going to be my new tattoo that I'm going to get after quarantine. So Richard Speck actually broke into a modest 2-story home where a group of 9 nursing students lived, and Speck came through the window with a hunting knife and a .22 caliber pistol. Now, remember, the 9 nursing students are living here. It's almost like a small little sorority, okay?
Yeah.
He went to one of the rooms, knocked on the door belonging to 23-year-old Filipino student named Corazon Amaral and her roommate. Corazon means heart, so I just feel like that's so important for this kind of story. It's actually very special, and she's going to come into play a lot during this case. Now, according to Chicago Tribune, quote, in low tones, the man ordered the 2 students into the adjoining bedroom where the 4 other nurses were awakened. Then all 6 were herded into a rear bedroom. Now, I don't know about you, John, but the idea of hurting anybody really actually terrifies me. It's a claustrophobic thing. It invokes a lot of emotions in me, right?
It makes you feel like you're not really in control. You know, if you're being herded, someone else is controlling where you're going.
Almost like we're being treated like animals. So among the nurses were Merlita Gargulo and Valentina Pasion, who were both 23, and like Amaral, they were also Filipino. There were also 3 Americans, Patricia Matusek and Pamela Wilkening, who were both 20, and then Nina Schmali, who was 24. So these are very, very young students. I mean, no matter who we're talking about, no matter what age, but I think it's important to just say that these people were at like kind of the prime of their life. They had so much life to live, if you will.
Yeah, totally.
Sat down on the floor and told the girls he needed money to get to New Orleans. He also told them he wouldn't hurt them. He just needed money. So Speck tore up bed sheets and used them to bind their hands behind their back. So they're really losing all control here. The Chicago Tribune reported that they were hogtied. So talking about being treated like animals, one by one, Speck led them out of the room, and Amaral, who was 5'2", so pretty tiny, and you know I care about specifics here, and she was less than 100 pounds. She managed to roll under the bed, and he wasn't really looking at the time, so she actually could hide, which was very important. And luckily, Speck actually lost count of his victims, and he completely forgot about her. So thank God he was a little bit of an idiot and couldn't count them. Amaral stayed hidden until about 6 a.m., several hours after Speck had fled. And little did Amaral know that 3 additional nursing students had come home midway through this entire ordeal. Suzanne Ferris, who was 21, Gloria Jean Davy, who was 22, and Marianne Jordan, who was 20. Again, all very young. Amaral found Ferris dead in the hallway from stabs to the chest and chin. She found Matusek, Wilkening, and Jordan dead in the east bedroom. I mean, imagine finding this out after just trying to save your own life underneath a bed. Matusek had been strangled. Wilkening had been strangled and stabbed, and her body was found sprawled on a bed. And Jordan had been stabbed in the chest, neck, and left eye. So just a brutal, brutal scene. Now, Amaral found 3 others in the west bedroom. They'd been strangled and stabbed. And, you know, Matt's doing actually a really good job of just showing the scene here and what she can expect from hiding underneath a bed for her life. And she comes back to this. So Davy was actually later found downstairs naked on a sofa. She'd been raped and strangled. Amaral stepped out of a second-story window onto a large, ledge, kind of balcony thing, and just began screaming for help. I mean, that would be the first instinct anyway. Many different accounts reported that Amaral screamed, quote, "They're all dead. Help, help. My friends are all dead. Oh, God, I'm the only one alive," end quote. The killing would later become known as the first random mass murder of the 20th century.
It didn't take authorities long to catch Speck. Police released a sketch that ran on the front page of newspapers, which you can see here, which Matt is showing us.
Let's be honest. I mean, you and I kind of talk about courtroom sketches a lot, but just like, narratives. I would never be good at describing someone like that.
Yeah.
This sketch kind of looks like an everyday man to me. Like that could look like a number of different people, but when you see it the side by side, I actually think it's pretty good.
Well, Speck had been hiding out at Skid Row flop houses in Chicago for a couple of days before he tried and failed to commit suicide by slitting his wrists. An emergency room doctor thought he looked familiar, though, and then when he saw the patient's "Born to Raise Hell" tattoo that matched the description in the newspaper. Police brought Amaral. I don't know if you can really see it in the visual that Matt is using there, but it's there somewhere. The police brought Amaral to the hospital room and she ID'd him. Richard Speck was a 24-year-old ex-con with what the Daily News called, quote, a history of petty crimes, drinking, drugs, rape, and other violence stretching back to childhood, end quote. And we're going to get to that in a second as well. He was born in 1941 in Monmouth, Illinois. Speck had a pretty terrible sounding childhood filled with drunken beatings from his stepfather after his biological father passed away when he was just 6 years old. And Darren, you and I have talked a lot over the several hundred episodes of Martinis and Murder, which anyone can subscribe to today if they would like, about how childhood really builds a foundation for who people become as an adult. And what are your thoughts about, you know, his childhood being tragic and having to experience such abuse at such a young age? Do you feel like that was a foundation for essentially who he became later on in his life?
How could it not? I mean, drunken beatings from his stepfather, and after your biological father passes away at 6 years old, you know, there could be a lot of blaming there. I mean, it's just speculation, but like maybe he hated his own mother because of that, you know, because she sort of chose this father for him, you know, a stepfather who's drunkenly beating on him. That could have played a lot of aspects in the reason that he wanted to kill women.
Darren, that's a good point. Take a drink.
I will.
Well, he had spent time in Texas because of his stepfather and was first arrested, Darren, when he was 14 years old. Imagine being arrested when you're 14. According to the Daily News, quote, his relationship with women, including a wife and mother-in-law, were marked by violence, end quote. By 1966, Speck had at least 40 arrests on record, and he was wanted for questioning in connection with an attempted rape and murder in Monmouth. Speck was diagnosed as a sociopath, but was found fit to stand trial, although it was held 3 hours away because of the notoriety of the case at the time. As you can imagine, you know, when you attack a dorm room, essentially, that's going to make major news.
Of course.
Well, Speck said that he was innocent and had no memory of the murders. The Chicago Tribune reported that Amaral, quote, had the courage to step down from the witness stand, walk up to him, and point her finger 2 inches from his forehead. Quote, this is the man, she said, as pandemonium erupted. Yeah, Darren's doing a great job with that.
I'm pointing 2 inches. This is the murder.
Well, you know, that was a very bold move. Amaral recently said that she's had nightmares her entire life that Speck would come back to kill her. Well, it only took 49 minutes for the jury to find Richard Speck guilty of all 8 murders and recommended the death penalty, but he never got it. In 1971, the Supreme Court upheld his conviction, but reversed the death sentence because potential jurors opposed to capital punishment were excluded from the jury pool, which is a very interesting detail in this case.
And if someone who doesn't believe in the death penalty, I'm happy about that.
Yeah, well, he was denied parole 7 times. In a jailhouse interview 12 years after the murder, Speck said that the woman, quote, would be alive if one of them had not spit in his face, end quote. So you're kind of getting the details about what motivated that murder. In this case, it was someone spitting in his face, which is ridiculous.
But I think that also plays to the childhood trauma he had, to your point from earlier. You know, like most people, no one wants to be spit on. That's horrible. That's terrible. But I think their first reaction, you know, is to break in and kill. So that clearly is coming into play here.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, Richard Speck died in 1991 from a heart attack on the eve of his 50th birthday. No one showed up to claim his body, and he was buried in an undisclosed location. So, very tragic, crazy story. I mean, so many people died here. There is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel here that Amaral was able to survive and tell her story. And, you know, we've talked about this a lot. It's like if one person can survive something like that and inspire and give knowledge to others, you never know whose life, you know, she could be saving in a sense.
We just want to say thank you to our friends at CrimeCon for having us, and all of you guys for listening and watching us at home. We hope that we at least impressed you by looking better maybe than potentially. We don't know. I'm just drinking bourbon, but I had to look at you, John.
Yeah, hey, listen, whatever you need to do to get through it. I love your cup too, by the way, Darren.
Well, you bought it for me. That's fine.
That's true. And don't forget, you can learn more about the First Responders Children's Foundation raising money for their COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund. You can visit crimecon.givesmart.com or text CrimeCon to 76278. This was a blast, Darren. It's so good to see you. We can't be together.
I can't wait for a real life CrimeCon to come back. We will be there better than ever. John, I will give you a virtual Harry Potter World Orlando trip, but this was just as good, and we hope you guys all are staying safe and healthy out there.
See you guys.
Bye.
For 2 years, I dedicated every day to this case.
Who really killed her?
I held her hand as she took her last breath and told her it was okay. Hate turns into murder.
This story is nothing short of shocking. We might be able to find things they haven't seen.
Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. I'm Billy Jensen from the Murder Squad, The First Degree, and Chase Darkness with Me. I'm looking at pictures of Disney World because that's where we were supposed to be last week. Instead, we stayed home. But me and my podcast partners are working on some really great content with you. On The First Degree, we had an interview with Travis Alexander's best friend, who had a front row seat to the beginning of the relationship and how crazy it went with Jodi Arias. If you think you knew about the Jodi Arias case, listen, it's a 3-parter, First Degree. It's crazy. I let Paul take the reins, and we did a deep dive into the autopsy reports of the West Memphis 3 victims, and he refutes a lot of the theories that are out there. And we just announced on June 28th will be the premiere first episode of the HBO docuseries I'll Be Gone in the Dark about Michelle McNamara's book and the investigation. Myself, I'm in it. Karen Kilgariff is in it from My Favorite Murder, Paul Holes, obviously, and a bunch of other people. And then the Chase Darkness with Me paperback is coming out with a whole new chapter about the Bear Brook investigation and how a citizen detective was able to identify 3 of the 4 female victims in the barrels in Bear Brook State Park. So I'm trying to churn out content. I'm trying to stay happy and focused as much as I can. I'm sitting here reading books about Disney just to make myself feel better. And I just want to say to everybody on the front lines, thank you so much. You're really doing an amazing job, and we're all going to get through this. Keep digging.
Hi everybody, this is Paul Holes. I'm sitting here in my home office where I'm spending a lot of time these days doing the quarantine, the self-isolation. You know, I am digging into cases. The juices are flowing again after a pretty good break here. And I'm fortunate to live in the state of Colorado where I can still get out to the state park and practice social distancing, but be able to hit the trails, get on a bike. It's kind of a painful process as I'm learning how to ride a mountain bike out here. But it does bring up that others aren't as fortunate as I. And in particular, we have first responders that are on the front lines of fighting this virus. These first responders and their families are sacrificing a lot for us. And there are organizations out there that are helping the first responders. And in particular, I want to point out the First Responders Children's Foundation, who are helping pay for hotels for first responders so they don't bring the virus back to their families. They're even paying for funeral expenses for first responders who have succumbed to the virus. And if you are so willing, check out their website and see if there's something that you can do to help this organization out, because it's basically paying it forward. And I know we're all looking forward to when the next CrimeCon happens, because that means that the worst is behind us. And I wish everybody luck and everybody stay safe.
And now to close out our documentary update series, we caught up with the tenacious citizen detective Deanna Thompson from the disturbing hit docuseries Don't F with Cats. The series, which started airing late last year, focused on the violent behavior of a suspect, later identified as Luca Magnotta. Deanna and her fellow online investigator John Green will be at CrimeCon Orlando this fall for an in-depth session on the case and their work. But here's an update to hold you over until then.
Hi everyone, this is Deanna Thompson from Don't F with Cats, or you can call me Body Movin'. Doesn't matter to me, I will respond to both lately. We are here doing the CrimeCon at Home experience right now, which is pretty cool. Being in a documentary like this is like crazy, and it's a lot of attention, and it's a lot of like eyes on you, and it's bizarre. I didn't think people would watch this documentary because I thought it was just going to be too weird for people to, like, animal abuse is like really hard to sit through, you know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to watch like somebody killing kittens and stuff. So, you know, furthermore, nobody wants to sit there and watch somebody get, you know, killed either. But I just really thought that people would have a hard time with that, and I just didn't think it would take off like it did. So the popularity of the documentary really sort of took me by surprise. We're going to be doing 2 sessions in Orlando. We're going to be doing one that is like everything Don't F with Cats, and it's just going to be, you know, I think it's an hour-long session about, you know, the making of it, this behind the scenes, like stuff that like the documentary left out. And then another one, the other session that we're going to be doing is something that CrimeCon has never really done before. And it's talking about like the precursors to violent behavior. And one of them is animal abuse. So we're going to be talking to some experts in the field, some expert criminal behavior science people, and it's going to be really great, and I hope you guys come. So we're hoping to see you guys at CrimeCon and talk to, you know, about some of this really super heavy material, and then maybe have a cocktail or 2 after. So see you guys in October. Bye.
So we think you guys will all be pretty excited about our next guest coming up. They've made an appearance at the first ever CrimeCon in 2017, and they've been keeping pretty busy since then. Recently, they became New York Times best-selling authors with their work, The Last Book on the Left, Stories of Murders and Mayhem from History's Most Notorious Serial Killers. It was released just last month and is available now. We have the hosts of the podcast, Last Podcast on the Left here, Marcus Parks, Ben Kissel, and Henry Zabrowski. Hey guys, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hey.
Hi, thank you for having us, Stephanie.
Thank you for having us. It's nice to be inside this box. It's nice to be in the box.
Yeah,
I love being in the box. I hate being outside. I hate being in restaurants, and I hate being in bars and in conventions.
Well, I hope you guys are all staying safe in your boxes.
I want to say this to any of you ladies that are there. I mean, normally CrimeCon will be held in a hotel, and there'll be a little bit more dangerous, right? In your homes, it's a little bit, but you know what it comes down to? There's no one more scary than your partner. Because what they say, how many times, you know, when someone goes missing, the first person they always assume it is the husband or the wife, because it's always them. And so just know, actually, you're with the most dangerous person in the world, the person you love the most. And sometimes it's even scarier. It's the car. Be very careful while driving. All right. This is a debate for another day. We have some listener questions that we're going to get to here. So let's just throw a question down the pipe, and hopefully we can answer it, most likely horribly.
You throw it down his pipe, put the question in my pipe.
Okay.
Hi guys, I'm Amanda in Florida. I had a great time at your Orlando show and I hope to see you again soon, either on your book tour or at a future CrimeCon. I often find that when explaining my interest in true crime and podcasts like yours or My Favorite Murder, that the humor aspect is absolutely not intended to be disrespectful to the victims or their families. It serves as both a coping mechanism while talking about some pretty intense tragedies, but also as a means to sort of dismantle the perpetrator, because in a way, making light of them takes away their power. My question for each of you is, which of Henry's impressions are your personal favorites? Mine, by the way, is L. Ron Hubbard. Hail yourselves.
Mine is me as a normal human being.
Well,
because all of this is just a facade. Actors are never real people. There's no such thing. When you meet an actor, they're not correct. They're not real. They're a vessel for things to be poured inside. So they can't be trusted with public office, watching your family, or you shouldn't even be alone with them. I actually would be very scared to be on a movie set at all times.
I think that's great, and that's why you haven't had work in a while.
That's why.
It's your own choice.
It's me saving myself.
I'm Nanny. One of my favorite impressions of all time. It is a thought virus that has infected our entire network and all of our fan base. I think that's one of the greatest impressions of all time. Not that difficult of an impression, but I just feel like it drives to the core of your bone marrow, and that's why it's my favorite.
My favorite, I think, is a very underappreciated one, Helen Golay. Helen of the Black Widow murders.
I love those episodes.
Yes. Henry, of course, the Black Widow murders, Helen and her friend Olga murdered, I think, 3 men over the course of about 10 years through a series of insurance scams where they would bring in homeless men, take out insurance policies on them, and then kill them with I think it was a Mercury Sable, by running them over.
But the thing is that for the couple of months they got to be in that saddle, things were like really nice for those homeless men. They got brought to a nice home filled with lovely doilies. They got made love to. They got cooked for. Yeah, that's really sad, but it's like adopting a 12-year-old dog and then putting it to sleep. The 6 months time before then, you could actually you could take care of a dog in a fun way. You can really spoil it.
Yeah.
Well, it might be more dangerous to keep that 12-year-old dog alive. That might be more torture for it. So, yeah, maybe it's better to just put it out of its misery every now and again.
Mm-hmm. But I think with that,
people. But we're talking about people.
Yes, and with that impersonation, I think Henry absolutely captured the strange 65-year-old LA woman cadence.
All right, Minnie, Nanny, Helen, and Henry Zabrowski is his own best impression. Thank you so much for that question. Marquise, do we have another one?
We do. Let's throw it to the fan.
Yeah, throw it to the fans.
Hey guys, I just ordered your new book. I'm pretty excited to read it and see all the illustrations and count the Chris Christie references from Ben, which should be entertaining for all of us. But my question is for you guys, when researching deeper into these heavy hitter serial killers that you've covered really thoroughly on the podcast already, were there any new to you details or particularly interesting nuggets that surprised you? Follow up? Are you going to come to CrimeCon again? Because we miss you.
Deeper and deeper.
Deeper.
Unfortunately, it had nothing to do. It wasn't the book. It was the newest research to Peter Sutcliffe. We found out about his Yorkshire pants that I'm not going to even spoil on this. I want you to listen to our Peter Sutcliffe episodes that came out like 3 weeks ago.
Yes. Please listen. Well, that's the funny thing about that is that we found out a detail about a serial killer that is a well-known serial killer that we found out a detail that was completely kept secret from everybody, kept secret from the media, kept secret from even the lawyers, even the psychiatrists in charge of exploring the brain of Peter Sutcliffe. Not even they knew this very strange, very bizarre detail about this man and what sort of clothing he wore when he went out to kill.
Special.
Very special. But as far as what I found out new when researching this book, in between the time that we did our BTK series about Dennis Rader and the time that we wrote our book.
Yes, correct. Boo.
Catherine Ramsland wrote a book on BTK, Confessions of the BTK Killer, where a lot of his journal entries and a lot of the things that he was sort of thinking while he was doing all this ended up being published. And for many years, it was thought that BTK, of course, it was thought that he had gone years in between killings. And that is true. But what we found out is that he was still doing all of the terrible shit in between. He was still going out stalking. He was still going out looking for victims. It's just that he didn't find one that his horrible dickhead brain deemed just right all the time.
Because he was weak. And he didn't try hard enough.
Well, he was a horrible person. He was very mean to dogs.
Very mean to dogs. But that was what I found most surprising.
It's like a lot of people who roll out the mat for yoga, but they don't really get down into it. They're not doing cat-cow. They're not doing any of it. But you roll the mat and you think, oh, well, it's like I did it. Or like when people make a list of something like get eggs, and then you feel like you already did the thing because you put it on a list.
Yeah. Have you been listening to Tony Robbins' brother that's in prison for larceny or something?
Oh,
is there
Boney Robbins?
Motivational speaker that I don't know about?
Boney Robbins is very, very inspirational. And I tell you what, he helped me embezzle thousands of dollars from our company.
Oh, that's good. I guess
what did he say?
In the Shinrikyo series that you can feed an entire group of people just cabbage and they won't die. They'll actually love you more.
Let's go over another question from the listener.
Come on, you listener, give me a question. Now's your time to talk. You spent all your life listening to me, now you yell at me.
Jerry will answer a question.
Hey guys, this is Seth from Jeffersonville, Indiana, and I was wondering if you guys had ever researched a case and had it change your perspective or your outlook on the subject of it, like maybe if you empathized or felt sympathy for the subject and you didn't expect to, or your overall outlook was just completely wrong or anything like that. Did you ever run across anything like that personally for you guys? Thank you guys for doing this.
One of the, I'm not going to say sadder things, but one of the things that happens quite a bit when we begin to do our process of putting together our shows is the myth-busting part of the shows. I remember distinctly Robert Hansen, right? Where he was famous for being the serial killer that used to play the world's most dangerous game. They said that he would get sex workers, he'd release them into the fields of Alaska, and then he'd go hunting after them with the sniper rifle. And everyone was like, how dangerous is this man? And it turned out he didn't do any of that whatsoever. He had the one. When he was found, when they had the sex worker running from him and she was discovered by the police, that's the only type of organized running anyone had did. So it kind of just took the thing that was the most memorable part of his serial killing career and kind of X'd it out.
Well, we ran across that same thing with Peter Sutcliffe as well, because what you always hear about Peter Sutcliffe, from the serial killer encyclopedias, is that he was a missionary serial killer who murdered sex workers because God told him to, because he was schizophrenic. But then once we get into it, we find out that Peter Sutcliffe came up with that whole story after he was arrested in order to try to, avoid life in prison. He was trying to get a lesser prison sentence. But on the other hand, that's part of what we do here is that, these sort of hot takes on serial killers that a lot of, the true crime media will come out with is they are trying to give you the juiciest, most fictionalized version of these people in order to scare you as much as possible. And here here on Last Podcast on the Left, we really enjoy like exploring the serial killers, exploring their psychology, and exploring the weird, dumb lives that each and every one of these men live. They all live horrible, weird, strange, pathetic lives. And, you know, Robert Hansen was not some sort of monster. He was not some sort of evil genius, you know, hunting women in the Alaskan wilderness.
He was a failed baker.
He was a failed baker with horrible
He was a
acne.
baker. He had a whole.
Now you're defending him? Now you're defending him. I'm saying the minute.
But I will defend the baking. He had a baking shop. If you have a bakery and you've made it as a baker, that's the only thing you have to do.
I want to say the debate is still out whether or not you can separate the work from the artist, right? When it comes down to it, I don't know if we can. For me, and maybe it's just me, as soon as you start killing women, I'm not as into the cakes.
You know, if he made you a perfect croissant, you would love it still.
We got 15 minutes to talk to CrimeCon. You know, I am watching the dogs play with your balls as you sit. It looks like I hear a snarling crow and you're going.
What is wrong with you? But I think that we are getting near our end here. At least my phone's about to die, so I believe that's about it. So I want to thank everyone for staring at us, and we can't wait to see you all on the road in 2021.
Is there like a quick fire question?
CrimeCon in the near future.
Is there a quick fire question? Do we want to do one last one that's fast?
Well, I mean, we don't really have any more questions from the fans.
Good.
We could have a question from Merritt. Merritt, Merritt at CrimeCon.
I'm at 4% battery life, so we got to go.
Let's see if you could do this. This is like one of those. This is like an action film. The saddest, dumbest action film that's ever been.
Okay, I guess rapid fire. What was your favorite episode or series of episodes to research and record?
Rapid fire. I'll go with the Borley Rectory. I like the Borley Rectory.
You did no research on that one, but that's fine. You don't need it. You didn't need to for that one.
I watched a scary movie the night before.
Jonestown, easily Jonestown. One of the most difficult, but definitely the most fascinating, and the only one where when I was done with the series, I wanted more. I could have started an entire Jonestown podcast.
Well, that's because of the Jonestown fantasies you and your wife were putting together at home.
I want to be Jim Jones tonight. I have the sunglasses on.
No, we did like a full like Jonestown vacation after that. Like we went to Lynn, Indiana. We went to his hometown. We went to all these different grave sites.
This was their idea of a romantic time. They went to Indiana.
It was our 2-year anniversary, and it was lovely.
Well, hey. So that you'll find love too. Everyone out there, don't forget you can also find love.
So thank you.
All right.
Thank you all so much. Hail yourselves. We'll see you all soon.
We can always count on the Last Podcast on the Left to leave us laughing. Hopefully, they'll be joining us very soon at a live CrimeCon event. Our time has come to an end today, but we really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to keep watching some true crime, don't forget to head over to Oxygen for the premiere episode of the 2nd season of Accident, Suicide, or Murder tonight. You definitely don't want to miss it. Thank you all for being a part of the first ever CrimeCon at Home. Thank you to Oxygen, to all of our guests and panelists, and thank you for your support to the First Responders Children's Foundation. There is still time to donate by visiting crimecon.givesmart.com or text CrimeCon to 76278. Any amount can help out these heroes. And if you haven't gotten your tickets yet for CrimeCon 2020 in Orlando, it's currently set for October 30th to November 1st. You can head over to crimecon.com to learn more. We're all very hopeful that the next 5 months trend in the right direction and that we're able to see each other soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.